It's Race to World First Day.
Now I'm in Denmark. I'm having a sweetie.
Sinister forces are awakening. They sense your presence. Desatoreth wields some power that can tear at our minds.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is our absolute pleasure to once again be bringing you the Race to World First on behalf of Echo Esports. And we're back! The Race to World First is concluded. Echo did not bring it home this time. They were dethroned once again, bringing it to 3 apiece between the two guilds, going into the final raid of Dragonflight, the next race, and that is going to be the banger. That's going to be the barn burner, where everything is on the line, and it's going to be so cool. It's got a good story to it. Of course, the race will go on afterwards, but like the tiebreaker as it comes into the end of the expansion, mwah, magnifique. Got my wonderful display. Very happy with it. Of course, second is where the guys felt. And a lot of talk about this race, and a lot of people saying, hey, obviously the conversation started up again about the global release. So I wanted to get some thoughts out there while it's all fresh in my mind and talk about it. First of all, Liquid deserved this win. They outplayed Echo on pretty much every boss, I thought. I know, again, let's just rewind. This is my personal thoughts. Obviously, I spent time at the Echo event. I spoke to the Echo players, but that's their thoughts, and anything that we talk about in private stays private. That's one of my golden rules, as well as Liquid will know as well from the members I've spoke to there. Anything we talk to in private is private and will remain that way. This is just my personal thoughts. So I personally thought Liquid outplayed Echo on pretty much every single boss. I didn't see any reason they shouldn't have won. In fact, in my opinion, they probably should have picked up the kill several hours before they did, but fatigue and having little sleep, knowing that that boss was going to die very quickly the next day, probably played some part in it. I remember watching it on my phone in the caster lounge, thinking like, we're just kind of hoping at this point that Liquid just keep kind of stumbling, because they stumbled for a few hours in order to get the kill. But they had the strat down, they had everything in place, and I was like, we're just kind of hoping they fuck up, essentially, in order to get the kill. And every time someone died on their team, they were like, yay! Echo have another chance to try and claim it. Of course, reaching 5% before Liquid took the kill, and then picking up the kill a few hours later, which sparked the other controversies.
We're gonna just keep them alive. Keep the Infinite Duress alive. Just external them. I'll call their name. External them. External them.
Let's fucking yes! Fuck yes!
All right, let's get into this. My TLDR of what I thought of the race. I thought this was really, really good for the average player of World of Warcraft, and for players who were thinking about returning, or maybe didn't even have World of Warcraft on their agenda to return. I think this did super, super well for them. 2 things Blizzard did really well here. 1, bug-free. Had to be. Like, pretty much bug-free. No massive walls, a slight buff to, like, Rashok's health, and a couple of little minor things that they were so fast in fixing. It was crazy. They were all over it. After Raszageth, totally what needed to happen was that. So that created a great experience where they weren't like, sake Blizzard, you know, people being down on Blizzard for that. The second thing was they clearly made this raid way more accessible. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's a nuanced discussion, which I know some people don't like, but we'll get into it. So the warning flags were there. And again, I know some people who are like probably thinking I'm a pure Echo fan. I am wearing my shirt because, of course, it's the Race to World First. I do not have a Liquid one. Is that this was being discussed long before any guild got to Mythic. So you can go and check that if you want to. I don't really care. So it was very clear something was off compared to the usual style of raiding. when Normal and Heroic were just kind of falling over for like everybody. It was weird, and the players talked about like, we're like clearing Heroic really, really easy. And I kind of thought that as a warning sign, like maybe we should go into Mythic and see what the fucking score is here, because Blizzard have clearly made this raid more accessible. I'm not using the word easier because I think that makes it sound trivial. That's not the case. Accessible means that they've made it so the bosses are definitely doable. And I think Blizzard really, really wanted to counter a perception that the viewers of the Race to World First, which is the most watched event Blizzard has, and they have no involvement in it. It's the freest marketing ever. And it also includes a lot of people who don't play the game anymore or have left the game for one reason or another and may potentially come back. What happens is, and we could always refer back to Crab Daddy here for this one, even though it's an anomaly, is that a lot of people watch the race and they really love, as much as I do as well, seeing the players mash their head against something really goddamn hard. Like, just like, Jesus Christ, this fight is insane. This is crazy. This is awesome for watching. Entertainment purposes, great. But those players are probably also thinking, just like I have at some points, I'm really glad I'm not going to play this now. And that creates, you're actually like off-putting people from playing your game in some ways. Because Normal and Heroic, especially for the top guilds, do fall over relatively easily. But then they see the Mythic and are like, I'm never stepping foot in their entire life. That's not happening. In my opinion, Aberrus has no bosses where people walked away with that opinion. None at all. Every person who watched those bosses was like, I could probably do that. And I'll probably like feel kind of cool about coming and playing it and knowing I'm not going to have to spend 700 pulls on this boss. I'm not going to be there for like 2 months trying to work on the progress for this boss. So I think Blizzard intentionally made Aberrus more accessible to everybody, especially because they're desperately wanting players to come back to WoW. Of course, we had BFA followed by Shadowlands. A lot of people left and found new homes, that blanket that people enjoyed of World of Warcraft for so many years, where even if things were kind of bad, it wasn't bad enough to like give up on everything you'd done over the years. Kind of drifted away. So now players have gone and found new homes, and since trying to tempt them back is not easy after a lot of those players feel burned and even hurt by what happened with WoW over those couple of expansions. So this was a good way of tempting people back in. Raid looks really fun. Bosses look really interesting. Got some big dragons. Zaskan was my absolute favorite boss of the raid by a long way. Real shame that that boss, as of recording this, is now being cheesed by several guilds because they found a way around it. But some really interesting bosses. And doable. Nothing that would make you want to tear your hair out, right? And turn into like old Preach. Pre-leaving World of Warcraft. The old bald-headed Preach. That didn't happen.
Knock in 2, 1. Dodge the Terrans.
Nice, but... Wait.
Go. Please.
I saw that. I killed this fucker.
I can heal this now. Thank you.
Roger has the Terrans.
Come on.
Thank
I'm slaughtering him, man.
Now, from a race perspective, though, I didn't particularly enjoy it. That was my personal opinion. I felt that early on, and in fact, that could be reflected in my casting. When we got to Sarkareth, I was like, okay. This fight doesn't look particularly special or anything like that, but all right. We were there too quickly. In fact, I'm kind of curious because a lot of people are like, I'm seeing a lot of feedback, which is like, oh, the race was like the perfect length. I wonder if people would still have that feeling, one, if their favorite team didn't win, which is always going to create some kind of bias, or if we didn't have splits during Mythic Week, if it went back to what it did pre-Vault of the Incarnates, where there was Heroic Week, and you got to do all those splits off camera, no one ever had to watch them, and then you came in and started the Mythic raid straight away. Because this raid is technically like 6 days long, but the actual amount of Mythic raiding was like 2.5, barely 3, which was not enough for me. That was not enough. And certainly with the level of preparation that the guilds put into this, must feel in some way like, Christ, we did like thousands of hours of prep. And I'm sure Liquid don't feel this way because they brought home the victory. But we did thousands of hours of preparation and we got to raid for like 2.5 days. Like, whatever. Whatever. But so from that perspective, I didn't enjoy the race. I loved what it did for a lot of players who are considering playing World of Warcraft. But on the other hand, for a race perspective, it was just a little too little. But I do think that's an anomaly. It's very similar to what happened with Sepulchre, that 3-week-long Goliath raid And after that, there was a lot of talk about the mental health of the players. Like, is it right that Blizzard obviously know the race exists and it's not just the top 2 that are going for it? And all these players are just like, Jesus Christ, fatigued and tired, exhausted off the back of it. Should we make some major sweeping changes? And my answer then was the same as it is now. No, not really. That was an anomalous situation. Like, we had things like Halondrus, which should not have been as hard as they were. And also, at the time, and I still believe this, it was 2 raids that were smushed together and should not have been like that. Anduin would probably have been the last boss otherwise. I feel the same way about this one. And there's another reason for that. I feel like this was made more accessible, and that resulted in a generally shorter race length, which it should have been. Blizzard has said they want the race to last 10 days, but they accompanied the increased accessibility with the new gearing system. And I think that's where Blizzard made a blunder with that. So the new gearing system with the sharding and stuff, I know Liquid probably did the same thing. I know Echo did this, is they basically had a couple of people become PhD scientist professors on this new gearing system. Well, they could obviously maximize every single scrap of power they could in an efficient and timely way so that they could move forward at a good pace. And both guilds did very, very efficient split running and Mythic Plus to get where they needed to be. And we saw a lot of decisions being made on who's getting what. If you didn't get this, then you upgrade this. And what that resulted in is the players being very, very powerful by the time they hit like the last 4 bosses. Way more powerful than I think Blizzard intended them to be. And I say that because, in fact, Just Wait has done some fantastic stats on this. And if you take a look at this graphic, you'll see that via this system, the guys essentially nullified ever needing to go back to Heroic in a single week. If we go back to Sepulchre, it was like 4 weeks of Heroics before they like surpassed Heroic level. That's with multiple Mythic reclears, right? In other previous weeks, it was 2 or 3 weeks to get to like even still below the Heroic level. And although they were just below the Heroic item level cap, so to speak, by the time they reached Sarkareth, that's also a little skewed. They had BIS items from previous tiers with sockets and things, which were just better than what was dropping now. And on top of that, they were able to look at any weaker pieces or their super strong pieces and then upgrade them even further than they could in the past. And I believe that's why we saw what we saw towards the last 4 bosses. So what am I talking about there? They clearly were like too strong. It's my personal opinion. They were way too strong. So we saw things like on Echo of Neltharion. This is the penultimate boss. This is the big daddy. We could put him alongside things like Rygalon, right? These monster bosses that are waiting for you. Brewkeeper Diurnia, which was relatively well done with a good comp. But we look at this and like Echo killed that without even using the last portals in Neltharion's room. That probably shouldn't happen week 1. You remember, the guilds should be relatively undergeared at the World First level so that skill takes more of a priority over gear in the race to World First. That's what makes it so goddamn fun for every side to see who is better. But when you can actually sort of like make sloppy mistakes and still get through it and like skip portions of the fight, you're probably too strong. And we saw that with both guilds, in my opinion, on Sarkareth as well. Like, Phase 3 of Sarkareth on Liquid side had THD down, who was one of their absolute blasters for, like, a good portion of the fight. Echo had to do some intentional sacrifices, but still people died because it was, like, 1:30 a.m. for them, and they still got over the finish line. I never saw, in my personal opinion, any boss that pushed either Liquid or Echo to their absolute maximum, like actually really got them to drive home. And I'm sure some of the players disagree with me there, and that's fine. I'm looking at it as an observer, and what I saw is there were sloppy plays allowed kind of all over the place. You could make mistakes, and it was kind of fine. We were never looking for that perfect pull. We were never looking for like the absolute poetry that is raiding for me. When I see a guild perform a super hard fight, and it's fucking crystal clean, that's what I love. That's what I absolutely live for with the Race to World First, is seeing that. And I never saw that this race. I saw 2 extremely good guilds going at it hard, but still had the freedom to make some mistakes and still cross the finish line on several bosses. The Skarn would be a great example of that as well. So I never got that feeling from this. And I truly believe it was just a case of Blizzard just missing the mark slightly, because imagine if their item level was even like a little bit lower. A lot of these bosses would have looked very, very different, and we probably would have seen the 10-day race as Blizzard probably intended to show if they weren't as powerful, because you wouldn't have seen like this kind of sloppy get over the line kills, even with Zaskan. Magmarax was, you know, whatever. But Echo of Neltharius would have been a way tighter check. We might have seen the guilds being forced to skip Bloodlust in Phase 1. Echo managed that and showed it was possible. Liquid didn't, but still managed to like slam phase 3, even without doing that kind of change. Those kind of optimizations and min-maxing that I really love to see from the guild. Didn't quite see that. Going forward then, again, I don't think any major sweeping decisions need to be like taken from this. Of course, it's restarted the global release conversation. Of course, I think everybody invested invested in the race or the competitive side of WoW would be fine with a global release. Blizzard has talked about it. It's not on their agenda, but it has sparked up the conversation again, and never say never. Things could happen. That would be cool. And everybody coming up with all sorts of interesting ideas as to how the race could be held, because people want a good race out of it. But they also, from Blizzard's point of view, which is what I think we saw here, is they don't want to see bosses which are like, okay, that's cool, I'm never doing this, and I don't want to play your game. They don't want that either. So I imagine they'll be looking for some middle ground. The pendulum kind of swung from like a 3-week raid to a totally scuffed raid where things were bugged out of all hell to like a relatively more simpler raid that got done with mistakes being allowed to happen, and it needs to come back into some sort of alignment where we get the best of both worlds. And I think that's why the next race is going to be an absolute doozy, and I'm so hyped for it. 3 apiece, 1 boss will stand between them at the end, and if we can even get close, because yeah, while I didn't super enjoy this race, one massive shout outs to our production team and the caster squad. Absolutely crisp. Like, we put on the best show we possibly could.
Delicious. As he masticates the beans, slowly and sensually.
But ultimately, it comes down to the raiding itself. And that's what I want to see everything really, really shine. And just wasn't quite there. But next time with 3 apiece, if we can get that moment again where it's like Echo's going to like 14%, 5%, Liquid's going from 14 to 7 to 6, and like they're both side by side. As we kind of got towards the end, again, I think Liquid probably should have picked up the kill a little earlier, but they got what they did. They claimed that world first victory, and they deserved it. And Echo was sort of like just a little stressed at that point, chasing their tails, like, we've got to smash this boss, and kind of went full like YOLO Zerg mode in order to bring it down. That was kind of fun to see them back and forth. It's like, hey, Liquid just wiped. Echo's got to 5%. Liquid wiped again. Can they claim it? That was really fun. Like, seeing that side by side was awesome. I mean, that's the thing I think most of us fans want when it comes to the Race to World First. Well, that's my thoughts on it. I'd love to see your thoughts on it. Obviously, if your opinion is like Liquid is gods, Echo's gods, it was the ad start. I don't really care about that opinion. I'm interested in what you think about like the changes. Do you like it? And especially as a casual player, or certainly somebody who watches my channel and doesn't play World of Warcraft anymore, did this tempt you back in a little bit? There was this like, oh, cool. There's nothing here that makes me want to like kill anything, right? That doesn't make me want to rage and never touch the game again. Because I think that's what Blizzard was going for. That's my thoughts, guys. Till next time. Bye-bye.
I think everything we say here is in jest, but for you, this is the last thing I'm putting in my mouth at this Race to World First for charity. For now.
Salty!
It's so good.
Why are they covered in salt?
Oh, they're not. That's really good.
Oh,
Oh, this is so it's so good.
oh.
They're very nice. They're very nice.
You are a maniac!
I love these. Oh my god. Oh, it goes. It goes. It goes.
Oh, then the sourness comes through. It's like the worst whiskey sour I've ever had.
It goes. Okay, we're good now.
That is a intense start.
It is. That was a really bad. I think it's because we've been shaking them up.
Oh,
God.
My eyes are watering. That's horrible.
Oh.